Corporal Ernst Keller squints down the sight of his Panzer III's 50mm cannon. A Soviet T-34, hulking and alien, grinds toward him through swirling mud. Fewer, the gun kicks back. A direct hit, 400 meters, center mass. The clang echoes. The round sparks off the tank's sloped hull and shatters into the soil. Keller's loader, Private Mueller, rushes the next shell. Another shot, curse smothered behind gritted teeth. Again, the Soviet monster keeps coming, green paint scarred but untouched. Inside the turret, sweat crawls down Keller's spine. The loader's hands shake. The radio crackles with frantic German voices. Suddenly, the T-34's turret pivots, slow, inevitable, bringing its heavy 76.2mm gun to bear. Gott im Himmel, Mueller whispers. Their world explodes in a storm of steel and mud. Panic seizes the German column. 3 more shots, each a perfect strike, ricochet lifelessly from that defiant Soviet armor. Commands barked in disbelief. Aim higher, hit the tracks, but the shells are useless. Russian tanks push ahead, tracks devouring the sodden field. A second panzer bursts into flames as a T-34's gun thunderously answers. A third, fourth, and fifth crew scramble to reverse, hands slick with sweat. Radios jam with overlapping cries. They won't go down. Smoke chokes the air, orders dissolve into chaos. Keller's heart hammers as panzers lurch backward, metal shrieking. Their war just changed in a single, impossible minute. Across a 9-kilometer front near Mtsensk, 23 German tank crews report the same nightmare. Shells bounce, Russian tanks refuse to die. Each minute, another panzer falters. General Heinz Guderian himself demands answers. But 72 hours earlier, no one believed this could happen. 72 hours earlier, confidence runs thick among the German officers massed at Army Group Center. Inside a smoky field headquarters north of Orel, engineers joke about crude Soviet contraptions. Captain Felix Lang smirks to a subordinate. We've seen their best, tractors with cannons. For months, German doctrine calls the Panzer III and IV the world's most advanced machines. Official briefings dismiss new Soviet models. Our anti-tank guns will crack them open like eggs, promises one major. The mood, bordering on arrogant, infects every echelon. In training, officers repeat, advance with speed. Russian tanks are obsolete. No one expects a challenge, let alone a paradigm shift. Yet the Soviets move in absolute secrecy. Captured Polish partisans pass rumors of a new Russian tank, unconfirmed, dismissed as fantasy by most German analysts. Signals intelligence flags stray radio chatter, T-34 and KV, but the data is scattered, contradictory. Reports from advance units on June 20 describe strange, sloped armor and shells failing at 500 meters. Headquarters ignores these warnings. General Guderian's chief of staff waves it off. Comrade exaggeration. There's no order to adjust tactics or ammunition. The German staff believe the first week of Barbarossa is unfolding as planned. They note only minor losses and 0 credible tank threats. But at the front, Soviet engineers quietly route convoys of T-34s to the sector near Mtsensk. By nightfall, June 22, reconnaissance units sight wide tracks gouging the muddy earth. Unseen and unheralded, a wedge of 72 new Soviet tanks creeps into launch positions. At 0412 hours on June 23, they would discover the truth. First light, June 23. Corporal Keller's Panzer III shudders under sudden fire, unexpected shapes moving against the horizon. His gunner squints, uncertain. That's not a BT-7, too angular. Radios snap with confusion, enemy armor advancing, unknown type. German shells streak out, whistling through the morning haze. But after the first salvos, Keller's heart drops. The enemy tanks continue forward, tracks churning up wet earth, armor agleam. Others try side shots, even aim for the turret rim, desperate. Still nothing. Echoes of ricochets ring out, impossible, haunting. Someone yells, "It's invulnerable." All along the line, similar reports erupt. Shells not penetrating. Chaos erupts across the regiment. Lieutenant Holtz radios higher command. Requesting support, new Russian tank, our guns ineffective. By 700, at least 6 panzer platoons log identical failures. In the din, experienced commanders feel the ground shift beneath them. Tank after tank is abandoned, set alight, or reversed in panicked retreat. Gun crews relay the same desperate news: Achilles' heel unknown, immediate reinforcements required. Smoke columns mount above the plain. By 930, Guderian's staff receives their 15th urgent call. Emergency, Russian armor can't be stopped. Confusion spreads up the chain. The doctrine, so recently revered, is unraveling in real time. Soldiers on the ground realize the truth first. Privates, corporals, even company commanders are left to improvise, orders muddled by shock. The myth of German invincibility drowns beneath the grinding tracks and thunder of 76mm shells. Yet brutally, this is only the first hour. Over the next 6 hours, German anti-tank warfare will be tested to its breaking point, and the legend of the T-34 will be forged in fire. 0945 hours. Company B of Panzer Regiment 35 launches a desperate flanking counterattack from the southwest, hoping to strike the Soviet column's exposed side. 10 Panzer IVs surge forward, their engines roaring, mud splattering over glass visors. German tankers fire point-blank at the T-34's flanks, where armor is presumed weakest, but rounds ricochet or gouge only shallow scars. Within minutes, 3 panzers erupt in flame, their crews scrambling clear. The Russians advance methodically. By 1015, German command posts are rocked by news. The entire southern counterattack has failed, and Soviet tanks are smashing through supply lines behind the main front. Inside the lead T-34, Sergeant Anatoly Ivanovich steadies his crew. They peer through episcopes obscured with mud, nerves stretched taut. Ivanovich's radio crackles, Soviet infantry are mired behind, struggling to keep pace. Artillery from the German rear pounds the Russian column. One shell rocks Ivanovich's tank, jamming a hatch. Yet morale surges. Forward, he orders, their confidence growing as enemy shells ping harmlessly from their armor. Soviet units relay terse, coded messages, resistance light. Advance continues. But Ivanovich glimpses burning T-34s, victims of close-range mines and concentrated artillery. Confusion flickers: are they overextending? By 11:30, the balance tips irreversibly. German tank losses surpass 30, half their frontline strength. Soviet columns continue pushing, crushing abandoned panzers under steel tracks. Supply vehicles and field guns join the wreckage, scattering the battlefield. A German howitzer position is overrun. Its crew surrenders after the T-34s appear impervious to direct fire. Soviet casualties mount, too. 7 T-34s burn, but none are destroyed by tank fire. The defenders are incapable of slowing the Soviet thrust. The corridor to Mtsensk is open. At higher command, telephones buzz relentlessly. Oberstleutnant Neumann, receiving fragmented front-line updates, abruptly orders a full withdrawal to secondary positions at 12:08. His superior, General von Weichs, demands explanation. Are those numbers correct? Is the enemy unstoppable? Messages arrive too late to coordinate, battalion signals lost in battlefield interference. Local commanders improvise with what little they know. Orders to blow bridges go out, but too slowly to halt the Soviet advance. Fragmentation at every level paralyzes the response. The German armor's failure stemmed largely from technical mismatches unforeseen by their pre-war doctrine. Panzer III tanks, the backbone of the German advance, fielded a 50mm KWK-38L42 gun capable, on paper, of defeating up to 47mm of vertical armor at 500 meters. Against earlier Soviet BT and T-26 models, this was sufficient. But the T-34's revolutionary 45mm thick sloped frontal armor could deflect even point-blank projectiles. Lab tests had never assessed sloped armor's real field resilience. An incoming 50mm shell, striking at a 60-degree angle, would be deflected. The effective armor was closer to 90mm. Soviet 76.2mm guns, meanwhile, boasted superior armor penetration and a better high-explosive charge. German shells shattered or bounced, while Soviet rounds could devastate Panzer III and IV hulls at similar or greater distances. Critical battlefield intelligence that could warn of these failures had not filtered through in time. Tactically, the German command had grown complacent from months of easy victories. Operational doctrine presumed the enemy's tanks would fall to traditional flanking maneuvers and concentrated fire by mobile anti-tank teams. Intelligence briefings dismissed reports on Soviet armor upgrades, and staff trusted in the old rhythm of blitzkrieg: speed, coordination, and initiative. At Mtsensk, however, the landscape was sodden and forested, favoring defense and negating the panzer's mobility. Attack plans were based on obsolete assumptions. Counterattack orders funneled units directly into the path of protected Soviet tanks. In previous encounters, especially against French and British tanks in 1940, German units achieved superiority through flexibility and mutual radio support. Here, that coordination broke down under equipment failures and disrupted communications. Captured field notebooks and post-war interrogations vividly illustrate the scope of the German shock. General Guderian wrote, "Our panzer weapons are ineffective against the T-34. The T-34 is a fearsome opponent." After action reports noted, of the 47 Panzer III engaged, only 6 returned operational. At least 15 confirmed destroyed by direct enemy fire. Soviet records confirm enemy anti-tank effort negligible, minimal personnel loss, armor effectively invulnerable at range. Days later, German engineers urgently requested armor-piercing upgrades, a tacit admission of doctrinal and technical surprise. By 1600 hours, surviving elements of Panzer Regiment 35 and supporting infantry withdraw 5 kilometers west, reorganizing under sporadic air cover. Field hospitals are inundated, over 120 wounded, 41 reported killed or missing. 2 makeshift anti-tank fronts are hastily established using 37mm pack guns scavenged from abandoned positions. Orders go out for remaining supply trucks to retreat north, leaving 3/4 of heavy equipment lost or destroyed. Soviet units, meanwhile, overrun 3 artillery redoubts, capturing 120 prisoners and dozens of anti-tank rifles, then set up blocking positions astride the highway to Mtsensk. German Higher Command receives incomplete and contradictory reports throughout the day. At 17:30, Army Group Center issues a general alert. All units to assume new Russian armor immune to current weapons. Guderian's staff orders immediate shipment of 88mm flak guns forward, with strict instructions on emergency deployment. By midnight, signal officers distribute new tactical memoranda down the chain, instructing officers to avoid direct engagements except at close-range ambush. Soviet commanders, reviewing captured documents, accelerate their own plans and coordinate with forward infantry for a possible night assault. The final tally by dawn, June 24, is grim. German losses: 43 tanks destroyed, 18 immobilized or captured, over 200 casualties and 10 square kilometers of ground conceded. Soviet losses: 14 tanks knocked out, primarily by mines and artillery, with moderate infantry casualties. The entire supply corridor around Mtsensk is now in Soviet hands, delaying the German timetable for Operation Barbarossa by at least 4 days according to war diaries. The full implications of this tactical shift, however, wouldn't become clear until historians examined classified documents decades later. Fact 1. Personal account Sergeant Heinz Drexler, Panzer IV gunner, scribbled in his diary on June 23. "We fire straight at them, twice, 3 times. The shells fly off as if we're children tossing stones. I see Müller pray over the site. We are small this morning." This candid reflection, buried in his effects until discovered by family in the 1980s, undermines the myth of German crew confidence. While official Wehrmacht communiques projected resolve under pressure, Drexler's words expose fear and disbelief at the battlefield reality, giving historians a rare unfiltered lens onto the psychological shock that rippled through German ranks. Fact 2. Logistical reality German quartermaster ledgers from Panzer Regiment 35, withheld from public scrutiny until the 1990s, reveal that only 180 armor-piercing shells remained on the morning of June 23, less than half the reserve listed in official reports. Requisition requests in the aftermath detail: 17 shells per vehicle expended, resupply impossible for 24 hours. This acute shortage, contrary to propaganda claims of endless material, meant several platoons faced the T-34's onslaught with practice or high explosive rounds, compounding tactical impotence and eroding morale during the battle's height. Fact 3. Official versus actual records and after-action summary sent to Guderian recorded only 25 tanks lost at Mtsensk. However, Soviet battlefield recovery logs, German prisoner interrogations, and later investigations cite at least 43 destroyed or abandoned panzers, with some damaged vehicles left unrecoverable for weeks. The discrepancy arose partly from a desire to downplay defeat, but also from chaotic reporting under fire and lost communications. Only the post-war juxtaposition of enemy archives and regimental diaries revealed the true scale of the loss. Fact 4. Ground-level reality official doctrine directed tankers to engage Soviet armor in coordinated strikes and flanking maneuvers. In practice, mud and forest hampered movement, while visibility was reduced to a few hundred meters. Multiple field letters record tankers abandoning vehicles and using captured Soviet anti-tank rifles or improvising close-range ambushes from concealed tree lines. This pattern of improvisation, unplanned, decentralized, emerges repeatedly in dozens of frontline testimonies. Fact 5. Environmental factor meteorological records pinpoint rainfall for 4 consecutive days prior to June 23, resulting in ground sodden to depths of over 20 centimeters. German tanks, optimized for speed, routinely bogged down, their narrower tracks ill-suited for the soft terrain. The T-34, with wider tracks and resilient suspension, maintained mobility and protection, its dominance under abnormal conditions documented in both German and Soviet maintenance logs. In the years immediately following the battle at Mtsensk, Western and Soviet historians alike framed the encounter as a testament to Russian bravery, or, alternately, German overconfidence. Early accounts, such as those published in the official German histories, the Wehrmacht War Diaries, or Soviet government-sponsored volumes, drew from wartime propaganda, incomplete after-action reports, and the testimony of senior officers. Details about equipment performance or supply deficits were generally omitted. The prevailing interpretation cast German defeat as a function of temporary surprise, a mere stumble in the pace of blitzkrieg. With the gradual declassification of Soviet archival records after the collapse of the USSR and the release of previously private German testimonies, the scholarly picture changed. Historian Rolf Dieter Müller, in the 1990s, incorporated captured Soviet, after-action reports and quartermaster data to reveal the full cost and chaos of the German failure. Documents such as Drexler's diary and logistical logs corrected the sanitized official narrative. Critical ray examination of casualty figures, weapon performance, and environmental variables began to challenge the myth of a purely psychological or leadership-driven collapse. Instead, the technical disparity between the T-34 and German armor became central to explanations of the battle's outcome. Today, historians broadly agree that the shock at Mtsensk marked a watershed in Wehrmacht armored doctrine and directly influenced the German push for new tank designs. The consensus emphasizes several factors: the technical superiority of the T-34, logistical shortages, flawed command assumptions, and the disabling effect of environmental conditions. Still, disputes remain about the internal Soviet situation. Some argue the Red Army could have exploited the breakthrough further, were it not for leadership and communication failures. Moreover, the relative weight of shock versus material inferiority continues to be debated among military scholars, demonstrating the event's continuing complexity in historical memory. Individual 1. Corporal Johann Kuhn, Panzer III Loader, 24, Dresden before the war. Kuhn was an apprentice machinist. During the chaos at Mtsensk, he manned the loader position under relentless fire. Wounded by shrapnel as a T-34 round struck his tank, Kuhn later recalled, "Everything I learned was useless. We were rabbits in the open. When the shell hit us, I crawled out and saw my commander praying in the mud." He survived the explosion but suffered burns and hearing loss. After months in a field hospital, Kuhn was discharged as unfit for further service, working post-war as a factory foreman. His oral testimony is preserved at the Bundesarchiv in Koblenz. Individual 2, Sergeant Petr Babi, T-34 commander, 29, Leningrad leading the charge near Mtsensk. Babi's crew knocked out at least 3 German tanks. He later described a sense of invincibility. For the first time, I felt the fascists retreat. Our tank took hits, but we moved on. He survived the war, becoming a tractor mechanic, but his letters reflect unease at the heavy losses among friends. Babi's perspective, proud yet tinged with trauma, mirrors many Soviet accounts. The technical advantage did not immunize crews from loss or fear. Individual 3. Anna Lepke, war widow, Leipzig. The loss of her husband, Oberfeldwebel Stefan Lepke, at Mtsensk led Anna into years of hardship. She struggled with depression and poverty, receiving only a cursory pension. Her experience, repeated across thousands of German families, later shaped post-war welfare reforms and inspired debates about state mental health support for veterans' widows. Cases like hers drove the post-war German state to expand social services for those affected by combat trauma and bereavement. These individual experiences, when examined across hundreds of documented cases, revealed patterns that shaped strategic decisions throughout the campaign. Within hours of the unexpected Soviet armored assault at Mtsensk, the battlefield became a tableau of smoldering German tanks and mudded retreat. By 1208, Oberstleutnant Neumann's withdrawal orders cut the front and the famed Panzer spearhead by 5 kilometers west. 2 defensive lines, scratched together with scavenged 37mm guns, failed to stem the Soviet tide. By dusk, 43 German tanks had been destroyed or abandoned, over 200 men listed as casualties, and the vital supply corridor into Mtsensk, previously projected secure for at least another week, was irretrievably lost. Soviet T-34s entrenched themselves astride the highway, establishing blocking positions before midnight and forcing emergency reassessment of German logistics in the sector. Over the following week, this local disaster rippled outward. Guderian's advance south of Orel was postponed by 4 days as staff frantically reconsidered doctrine and awaited the arrival of urgently requested 88mm flak guns. The original plan for continuous armored thrusts gave way to cautious, infantry-supported advances, a sharp contrast to the opening blitzkrieg. Frontline regiments, previously rated at 70% operational strength, plunged to less than half their fighting power, with Panzer Regiment 35's effective tanks reduced from 62 to only 21. Ammunition reserves, already tight, reached crisis levels. Quartermasters reported less than 24 hours supply for several formations, forcing rationing and emergency airlifts. In the months that followed, the impact spread across the entire Eastern Front. German engineers, under direct orders from Berlin, began retrofitting surviving Panzer IIIs with long-barreled 50mm and even 75mm guns, a program that saw its first conversions delivered to field units by November 1941. Commanders, chastened by the shock at Mtsensk, pressed for the reallocation of scarce tungsten and steel to anti-tank efforts. Promotions for staff responsible for tank development accelerated, while commanders directly implicated in the debacle were quietly relieved or rotated away from frontline command. Soviet propaganda trumpeted the breakthrough to boost home front morale. Strategically, the loss at Mtsensk marked the end of armored German invulnerability. Plans for deep operational encirclements were scaled back, replaced by piecemeal advances and a growing dependence on heavier, slower armor. Resources channeled to Panzer upgrades altered the entire trajectory of the Eastern campaign. The T-34's demonstration at Mtsensk would dictate German weapons procurement and tactical manuals for years to come, reshaping the European theater. Had the German armored assault at Mtsensk broken the Soviet line with traditional ease, Operation Barbarossa's southern prong would have gained up to 4 lost days, potentially altering the schedule for the German drive to Moscow. A hypothetical absence of the T-34's armor advantage means German losses could have been cut by 2/3. Casualty projections revised down from over 200 to under 70, and regimental strength possibly maintained above 60%. With logistical lines unbroken, Guderian's panzer group likely reaches Bryansk and Tula weeks earlier, complicating Soviet reinforcement efforts. Soviet tank numbers would also be depleted sooner, forcing different allocation strategies elsewhere on the front. Yet, relative to other pivotal battles, Mtsensk stands out not for sheer scale, but for the qualitative shock it delivered. Unlike Stalingrad or Kursk, which involved hundreds of thousands of troops, Mtsensk engaged roughly 150 Soviet and 260 German armored vehicles. Yet the disparity in outcome, nearly 50% German tank losses in a single day, effectively ended the long-standing tradition of German armored dominance. This engagement is dissected at every major military academy because it spotlights operational surprise, doctrinal rigidity, and the strategic consequences of technological innovation under combat, all with sharply defined metrics. Hours lost, materiel destroyed, doctrine rewritten in real time. Most historians now agree that Mtsensk signaled a watershed moment in German-Soviet tank warfare. There is broad consensus that the technical leap represented by the T-34 fundamentally altered the course of Eastern Front engagements. Debate persists, however, on whether German leadership could, or should, have anticipated the innovation sooner, or whether the communication breakdowns and logistical shortages were more decisive. The current academic position underscores a confluence of surprise, material inferiority, and environmental effects as reasons why Mtsensk remains a singular case in military history. Corporal Johann Kuhn, whose tank was disabled by the first T-34 volley at Mtsensk, survived the battle with shrapnel wounds and burns. Discharged as unfit for further service, he spent his life as a factory foreman in Dresden. Years later, recounting his experience, he said to an interviewer at the Bundesarchiv, "We believed in our machines until that morning. When the shell hit, everything we thought we knew vanished." Kuhn's testimony, preserved in the oral history collection at Koblenz, personalizes the sudden loss of certainty and the trauma endured by many. The legacy of Mtsensk is enshrined at the Panzer Museum Munster in Germany, where a memorial dedicated in 1997 bears the names of lost crews from Panzer Regiment 35. Each October, veterans' families and military historians gather for a remembrance ceremony, while the Bundeswehr incorporates lessons from the battle into armored warfare instruction. The 2003 revisions to German Army tactical doctrine cite Mtsensk specifically as the impetus for emphasis on rapid threat assessment and flexibility in the face of technological surprise. Soviet recognition exists as well. Murals and plaques at the Mtsensk battlefield, established in 1968, commemorate both Red Army stoicism